We are live here to chat about mostly DC TV. I don't think I've screamed that loud at the start of a show in such a long time. Literally, Kate jumped, hit instant replay. You will see it. I'm so excited. And not only have I not been this excited to start an episode in a really long time, I have definitely not been this excited to talk about an episode wherein the topic, let me try to point in the right direction to remember that my camera's mirrored. To talk about an episode that has to do with DC TV. Since when was Kate? Since when am I excited to talk about that? When? Never.
The last Arrow after show podcast. That was the last time I thought we were actually excited to talk about anything in DC.
Truly. And I might have been excited about it ending. So we have an Arrow-less DCCW TV discussion, and very few things could get me this excited. But I will show you. Are you all ready? Are you all ready for a magic trick? I'm going to show you what it is that has me this excited. Ta-da! We have a special guest joining us. It's Carey. You guys can't see me anymore, but I'm still here, always watching, just in the creepiest framing possible. You might be wondering if the layout will change or get better. No, but we have Carey here joining us. Carey, say hi, introduce yourself.
Hello, everyone. My name is Carey. I'm a longtime DC CW TV watcher and glad to be here and share some insight and maybe get some insight on some things I've missed.
Yes. We are so excited because while I complain all the time about DCCW shows, there are some that I genuinely don't watch. Granted, I watch all the worst ones, so we're going to get into that. But there are some other ones, and Carey is here to fill in all the gaps. We are here to have a state of the DC Union to really talk about what we're watching, cover all the bases, all of the forgotten corners that I ignore, even though they're probably better than the Flash content. So here we are in the presence of a life-size cutout of Gina Torres to talk about the state of the DC Union. But first, we need to get into some news. And that is where Kate comes in, because Kate loves herself too much to watch much DC CW TV shows right now, but she does stay up to date on news. So she is going to kick us off with the news of the week. Could you top last week? I kind of doubt it. We had good news last week, but go ahead. Try.
Yeah, good. I don't think I can top it because some of it's kind of sad. So I'm not currently caught up with The Good Doctor, but I know we're both watching it. Antonia Thomas, who plays Claire Brown, is leaving. She won't be returning for the next season, which is sad. On a happier note, though, Netflix has announced a show called The Netherfield Girls. I know. This is going to shock you about what it's about. It's a modern day Pride and Prejudice adaptation. We have several Jane Austen adaptations on the horizon. I'm excited about that. So this one should come out in late next year. I then actually wanted to find and see if we could find any more upcoming Jane Austen news. None of the upcoming films have really had any updates since we last talked about it. There was an interview between Kaylee Cuoco and Elizabeth Olsen where they talked about a flight attendant and WandaVision. And since we've discussed both of those, I thought I'd mention that. It was a really good interview. And there is a new show coming to CBS, which kind of combines comedy and period drama. It is based on a BBC show called Ghosts and is now going to be on CBS. As an American version of it, and it's going to be about this girl starts to see and be able to talk to the ghosts that have died on the property.
Ooh, I hope she falls in love with a ghost. It sounds like it has the potential for some really tragic romances.
I don't know. I want to see the BBC version. I really want to find a way to watch that. And then last but not least, Loki the first episode came out this morning.
Yes. Have either of you watched it yet?
I have not.
I have, and I'm going to talk about it.
I haven't watched it yet, but I'm okay with spoilers. Carey, are you okay with spoilers?
Spoil away. Spoil away.
My threshold for spoilers goes from like, oh, if people haven't watched it within a week, whatever, then you can start spoiling it. And now it's like, if you didn't watch the thing posted at 12 a.m. by 12:01, spoilers are on here. Just kidding. But we will get into that. Carey, do you have any news we should throw into our news segment for today?
The only bit of news that I have is if you're a Batwoman fan.
I am.
More importantly, if you are a Nightwing fan.
Okay.
Cameron Johnson has announced, and I think it's been around a couple of different places also, but he will be making his live action debut as Nightwing. So that's some pretty fantastic news for Batwoman.
That is very exciting. I actually just finished watching this week's Batwoman episode right before we went live, and I had to do some jumping jacks and kind of run around the room to shake off the emotional despondency I had after it. And that's a good thing. And we'll get into it when we start talking about Batwoman, but man, this show sometimes really has the ability to just especially this season, really just stab at you. So I'm very excited to see that we have members of the Bat franchise joining there. My news for this week is really just top quality stuff. The Bachelorette started airing yesterday. And I know that's really highbrow, and not everybody is just willing to sit through the really deep, rich storyline that the Bachelor franchise has to offer. But I did watch it live. And it was the trash that you would expect. So very excited for that season to continue. But today we are going to talk about more quality things than the Bachelor. Oh, I will note actually one other piece of news with Bachelorette is that Chris Harrison is leaving the franchise. I could not possibly care less. I don't like him, but he's leaving the franchise. He's getting replaced by who knows what. Currently they have female hosts. So thrilled. Anyways, okay, I know I'm a one-trick pony when it comes to casting anything ever, but I feel like Tyra Banks would be a perfect replacement for him. But we won't get into that. Today we are getting into, hold on, let me switch the layout just a bit. So it's slightly less wonky than right now. Today we are getting into drum roll, the state of the DC Union. And by that I mean we started to think through, what was it, a couple weeks, Carey? I think you proposed this in the chat. What if we were to catch each other up on everything that's going on in all of the different franchises with, there's something in our bones. I think we just know it's crossover season, even though we're not necessarily having a typical crossover in 2021. And before crossover season, we a lot of times have to I haven't been watching the show. Let me go catch up on these storylines or whatever. Here's what you missed so you can understand where everybody's at. And I feel we're kind of at that place where we feel the need to catch up on everything. So that's where you come in, because you are watching Legends, and you're watching some of the other shows, perhaps in more depth than even I am. And I think, as you proposed, we can work together to catch each other up. Now, here's what I propose. I would love to hear your ratings on all of the shows that you're currently watching. And then, just to start us on a high note for my mental health, I want to hear what's working for each show. It doesn't have to be just one thing per show. It can be multiple things per show. But what are the highlights? What's really been working for you each season from the DC CW shows that you are watching? And with that, I pass it to you.
Fantastic. Well, I appreciate the opportunity. Let's talk about ratings, right? Let's just jump into that for each of the shows. And let's start with the absolute best one right now, Superman and Lois. Um, I know, I know most people try to like reserve like tens for like after a show's been on for like a good period of time and that sort of thing. But I haven't seen one real misstep in what they've done. So if that's the case, then why not give them a 10? I mean, they've sort of done everything right. I mean, you've got a superhero show that's got family elements to it, real mature situations that they're dealing with, and they're dealing with them in a mature way. So I certainly appreciate that. So yeah, Superman and Lois gets a 10. And here, where do we go from here? The funny thing is, Stargirl, I don't know if you want to call it part of like the CW verse or the Arrowverse. It's
definitely.
probably not, right? But it's my second favorite Arrowverse show right now. And so I would have to give Stargirl probably about an 8.5. Which is strange because it's a show that's centered around teenagers, and I think we sort of know sometimes that teenagers can be the worst, right?
Right.
But she's carrying that show, and again, they have a really nice family dynamic, and so I'm giving Stargirl an 8.5. Then where do we go from there? Black Lightning just went off the air. It had a strange sort of shortened season. I don't think that they knew that this was going to be the finale. They had some issues with one of their lead actresses deciding to sort of leave early. So that certainly played a role in the narrative that they could tell. But just as far as a rating, overall, I would give Black Lightning an 8. It certainly had an opportunity to shine some light on some issues and some topics and some narratives that you're not going to get in many other pockets of the Arrowverse. So that was nice and refreshing to see. So let's see. And I know I'm a Legend stan, and I haven't said anything about Legends and where their rating is.
I've been waiting.
I love the show. But that doesn't mean I can't see its flaws. So a rating, I would probably give it about a 7. It has the potential to be so much better and do so much better things. It's just not doing them right now, which is kind of disappointing. The leads on the show are fantastic. It's just something that's not hitting on it right now. There are just so many actors in the show. It's like it has a cast of about 10 folks, which is hard to navigate.
Wow.
So that's one of its problems. So Legends is about a 7. Batwoman, I would say right now it's about a 7 to a 7.5. And the only reason I say that is because obviously losing your lead means that you have to sort of course correct really fast during a pandemic, which has all of the challenges that involves. But they seem to be getting on a course where they can get that up to about an 8.5, I believe, with some of the stories that they want to tell. If you look at the lead cast, I don't know that you're going to see that sort of dynamic of a cast in terms of ethnicity, in terms of just their talent and skill. I don't know that you're going to find that in a whole lot of other shows. So it has the potential to be so much more. And one of my leads, Supergirl. God, I want to really love that show. The first season was fantastic. Calista Flockhart was absolutely fantastic and dynamic on that show in that first season. And they just seem to start losing their way. I'm going to give Supergirl about a 7. And The Flash, I stopped watching The Flash after last season. Like you're talking about,
Carey has more self-respect than I do.
It's funny because you were talking about crossover season, and this is about the time when you would sort of like, and I diligently watched all the shows, but sometimes you get to a point, obviously, at this time of season or this time of year when the crossovers are coming along, and so you want to pay closer attention to see what kind of narrative they're going to take from each show and fit it into a crossover. But fortunately, I didn't have that issue this year. Well, primarily because they didn't have a crossover, and also because I just had to get off that narcotic of the Flash. It became sort of hate watching, and I'm like, why do I want to spend an hour each week doing that? So I had to let it go. But if I had to give it a rating, first couple seasons were like 9s in my opinion. And then Barry keeps telling us that he's the fastest man alive. And then, of course, each episode we find out that he's not even close. And that just gets tiresome. So, like I said, that's probably lowest on the totem pole. Hope it didn't take up too much time, but that's my ratings for each of them and a little bit of insight on them, too.
You took the perfect amount of time. And I really like arguing, and I can't argue with any of your ratings. I don't have the exact same ratings as yours, but all of them are either really close or like make perfect sense. So when you're talking through kind of what's going well for all of them, is there anything particularly with your highest ranked shows that you feel they're doing so well this season in particular?
Superman and Lois, absolutely. In terms of just their family dynamic, you have a husband, and what I really like about the show is when they started, it basically was a situation where from the very first episode, they let you know that this has been a family unit that's been together for 14, 15 years. Mm-hmm. And so knowing that, when you see an issue that Clark and Lois or Superman and Lois have to deal with, they're seasoned in that, not only in having to deal with whatever crisis is happening, but they're also seasoned in the fact of knowing what each other needs, what space they need, and how they both process and handle situations and how they can support each other. And I mean, it's real easy for a show to basically just try to mine that relationship for unnecessary drama. Mm-hmm. And they do have drama between them, but it's not the silly kind. It's not the stupid kind. It's the real kind. Mm-hmm. Like on the most recent episode, I mean, spoiler if you hadn't seen it, but basically, no. And fun thing is, it's not the last episode because I just mainlined that last episode today. But the previous one, mm-hmm. when Lois was dealing with the grief of having a miscarriage, mm-hmm. That's real world, real deal stuff. Mm-hmm. And they dealt with it in a real world, mature way, which I certainly appreciated. So the family dynamic on Superman and Lois, the issues that they deal with, how they deal with them, even the teenagers mm-hmm. dealing with them in a mature way that's probably far beyond their years. So that's certainly what Superman and Lois is doing fantastically well, and pretty much leaving every other show, in my opinion, in the dust when it comes to those dynamics.
I absolutely agree. And I was so willing to be the biggest Superman and Lois hater because I was like, no, we need a female-led show. We don't need I was rooting for Superman to not be on Supergirl, and I didn't like that intrusion. I was just ready to be a hater. I don't know if that's just in my nature. I don't know. I'll go to therapy and work it out. But they really brought me around, and I feel like if they brought me around, that's really saying something. I want to touch on the chat because you got a couple of chat messages as you were talking. Stormy, in reference to The Flash, says she just wants to say, run, Cisco, from that show. And she mentions for her, she broke free from the CW after Arrow ended. Nothing against the remaining shows. She says, if John Diggle making appearances doesn't make her watch, though, nothing will. So we'll see if John Diggle making appearances coming up soon will make her watch. Because I know that made me replay a preview this week. Kate says she's proud of you for breaking free, and she agrees with Stormy. She's been loving Superman, but she's left everything else. She says the acting on Superman and Lois is superb. I love the vulnerability and deep emotional exploration. Stormy says she watched Little Legends this season, but after the Brandon Routh departure, she's done. Kate, let me go ahead and bring you on because I want to hear, while we're still on the positive train, before we get into any negativity, I want to hear your thoughts on Superman and Lois. So I'm going to put you and Carey on here, and I will briefly be invisible.
Yeah, so I am all caught up on Superman and Lois. I watched the one that aired last night, and I think that they're doing a fantastic job writing all of the main characters and even the kids that are actually close to the age of fantastic job, kind of bringing that emotion to it. It's also really interesting because there's a part of me that finds the Lois and Jonathan, the two characters that don't have superpowers, the more interesting characters. They're getting the more vulnerability and the more you get to see their struggle, whereas with Jordan and Clark, it's far more about the struggle of having the power and having to deal with that, and it's less about genuine emotion, but it's still really well done and really interesting, and you still get to see Jordan have his little cute flirtation with Sarah and try to like navigate that, which is always cute. It's fun.
What I particularly like is you look at the name of the show, it's Superman and Lois, right? It's not just Superman. And to a great degree, and in probably some of their better episodes, it's actually Lois who's driving the narrative. It's not a situation where it's like Superman with the shield standing front and center and then everyone else follow, get behind me. She, in fact, since I'm a reporter, there's probably a great number of her narratives and storylines that I'm much more interested in, because it's really difficult for some shows to get a reporter and do a reporter justice on screen. So often it's just they're sort of looking for like the lowest hanging fruit. So you might get like stereotype reporting types of situations. But I appreciate the fact that they give her an opportunity to sort of show what it's really like as much as TV can.
Oh yeah, I do enjoy that too, where they are going far deeper into her reporting than I've ever seen with a Lois, or Lois, like a similar character of Lois.
Absolutely. Didn't know Cammien was coming back in there. But again, like you were talking about, let's talk about like the kids, right? It would be so easy, and a lot of shows do it, where you have like two teenage brothers just sort of like button heads all the time, having an antagonistic relationship that isn't like deserved. And these two characters have so much that they could be envious of each other for, and they could really be going at each other. But I really appreciate their sort of emotional maturity and the connection that they have. Obviously, being twins helps, but that doesn't always mean that you're going to get along, right? But I just appreciate the dynamic that they get to portray on screen, both the good and the bad. So it's certainly a leader show for me.
Yeah, they definitely have their small arguments and stuff, and whenever something develops that can cause friction, they do explore that, and I think they do a good job, but they don't let it loom longer than it would, like, understandably and realistically actually go. And you can actually see that, for instance, Jonathan can recognize, yeah, I'm kind of jealous that he has his powers, but I also can appreciate that I get to have the normal life that he can't have.
There's a question
Absolutely.
in the chat from Stormy. She says, my question for you is, do you think Superman and Lois will hit a wall like other shows in the Arrowverse? She said most of the DC CW shows had a great first season or two, as you mentioned, Carey. And I'm going to disappear again and put a normal background while you guys answer that.
That's a very, very good question.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Kate. Sorry. Here's my answer. I hope not, right? But we have a cast that has demonstrated that they can handle significant storylines, and we've also had we've seen writers demonstrate that they can tell dynamic stories. So I don't know. I don't see this show falling off like maybe other shows have. There might be different routes that they might take. There might be different things that they try to explore. But I mean, when you've got like great actors, you've got good writers, you've got good direction. Having those three things in place, and if you can keep them in place, I think you should be pretty good.
Yeah, and I mean, I can point out to the fact that a lot of the CW shows in the first few seasons, there's a lot of times some actors that are having some rough spots, whereas all these actors seem to be doing great from the go, which is great, which does kind of instill some hope. But there's also a level of most, if not all, of the other CW DC shows have a similar structure of having a main big bad throughout the season or the first like a half season, and then having the villain of the week. I would argue that this show hasn't really had that. I mean, it's had little fights here and there each week to week, and you're definitely kind of exploring a new problem each week, but it's mainly just this kind of overarching journey where you're kind of trying to figure out who John Irons is, and then trying to figure out what Edge is doing, and it's kind of more of a big puzzle piece that's kind of all starting to form together, rather than just every episode you have the villain of the week, and then little hints as to who the big bad of the season is until the very end. So hopefully by doing that, they're not going to run through the good material that they can come up with as fast as some of the other shows have done in the past.
One of the things that this first season so far has sort of reminded me of was the last season of Arrow. And basically, Stephen Amell was basically saying, we know this is the end, right? So let's not hold back on any storylines. If there's something we want to do, let's do it. And to a great degree with Superman and Lois, with some of the revelations that they've made in the last couple of episodes and throughout the season, it sort of feels like they've taken the approach of, well, we don't have to wait an entire season to reveal something, but it's also revelations that also lead to deeper mysteries. So it's not like, okay, we've revealed something like this time, and all of a sudden it's like, well, what are we going to do next? It's like, well, this revelation is great, but what does it mean for everyone involved? What are they going to do? And so I think in that vein, you get the best of both worlds. You get like compelling television, but you also get it that it drives the story forward. It doesn't bring it to a halt.
Yeah, I totally agree.
I think one of the things that ties Superman and Lois and Stargirl together is the age range they're also showing in the main characters. Taking aside the age range they may be targeting in the audience, and also setting aside the actual age range of the cast, because we know this is the CW and they cast like 30-year-olds to play teenagers. It is what it is. But with Stargirl being so young, you would think that that would be kind of a negative. Like, okay, all of our complaints about, something being kind of juvenile or inconsistent, you would think that would be highlighted. But for me, I find when I'm watching a show where we have two, with Superman and Lois, their kids are very young. I think they're supposed to be like freshman or sophomore or something like that in high school. So these are not like early 20s or whatever. And with Stargirl, she's also quite young, and then her brother's even younger, so on. I find my patience increases because I know these are young characters, and because I see that there are also adults, and the adults are leads, and they're not just, Arrow and, Flash kind of as well, kind of got into a position where they were losing, your Moira Queen and your Harrison Wells, and you're really low on adults, and you only have the young ones to go off of. So it becomes extra frustrating when they behave young. When you get this really cool balance where you do have some young teens, and that adds a little bit of like cheesiness, but also makes us buy into the superhero story. But then you also have adults. The adults are present. They don't seem to be about to be killed off. It really increases my buy-in. Do you find that it increases your buy-in as well?
Yeah, probably.
Not everybody wants. It's interesting you brought up the point about sort of like the age dynamics on some of these shows. It's probably something I wanted to touch on. I don't know when we would, but you were talking about, I think, sort of where the CW goes. That's probably at a time I want to talk a little bit more about that, though.
Well, before we get into where we go from here, we will briefly touch on some negativity. So, with that, I suppose I'll put my whole face on screen. Bear with me. And I will no longer be a floating pair of teeth with Gina Torres behind me. Okay, so very briefly, I'll go into my ratings. I've already basically said mine are very similar to yours. And unlike where you went into what are they doing well, I will be the voice of negativity and say what they could do better, which is partially my fault for watching shows that have so many opportunities for improvement, as it were. Okay, so starting from we'll start from the top. I'm going to go ahead and put Superman and Lois up there. I won't go into it because we already talked about it just now, but all of the same reasons. I really wanted a show with a strong woman, and despite it starting with the title Superman, it actually did get there, and remarkably, they're getting me to not hate two teenage boys. So you really could not ask for more at this point. I wasn't going to go into this and give it a 10, but I like your rationale for this. I'll go ahead and give it a 9 for the first season. After that, I'm actually putting Batwoman up next of the ones that I watch regularly and am most into. And I will say I'm probably extending it a lot of grace. However, I feel like with this show, with this now being the first season where we have a new Batwoman, it deserves some grace. When there's moments where she gets a cheesy victory over a specific villain of the week, I can't find it in me to complain about something being cheesy or a storyline being revisited or something kind of being far out there, because I think she deserves all the grace and the buy-in and the leeway that we give the Barrys and the Olivers and the Karas of the world. So all of that cheesiness doesn't detract from the rating. Superman and Lois is still doing better, and there is still some opportunity for improvement within Batwoman. There were some moments where they just went so, I don't want to say like they just leaned too hard on allegory and didn't let us adapt to her world. But I don't think they're quite there anymore. And they really are letting her be her own hero and not just kind of using her as an object lesson. So I'm there. I don't love that they're bringing Kate Kane back at all, but I'm willing to do some buy-in there. I really wanted our Batwoman 2.0 to be our Batwoman alone, full stop. She is, enough. But, we'll wait and see. Then after that, I'm going to go ahead and put Supergirl, even though it continuously disappoints me at every turn, even in ways that I didn't think it could disappoint me. They are still, they are trying to capture the vibe that I think, no pun intended, that I think Flash is still trying to capture with sort of this like cheesiness. You saw that flashback episode to prom. I wanted to hate that. I couldn't fully hate it. It was still cute. They really, really are bad at romance on this show. Like, I rag on Flash at being bad at romance, and it is, but Supergirl somehow subverts potential in a way that Flash does not. With Flash, I think they struggle with just an unfortunate setup, some lack of chemistry. They kind of wrote themselves into a corner. There's not too much they can do. So they just throw all their female characters under a bus and hope for the best. With Supergirl, I really think there was a lot of potential at many turns for some really good romances, whether you're going to go all out and be on the Supergirl and Lena Luthor train with me, or whether you want to go more classic with the Kara and Jimmy, like any of those really had some good potential. And I think they really never recovered from what they did with Kara and Mon-El from there was just nowhere they could go. But it still ranks after that. I'm going to put Flash at the bottom. I'm putting Black Lightning in a category of its own because I love to, first of all, I always marathon that show. I've mentioned this before. I save up all the episodes. I marathon at the end of the season. That show ignites some kind of impatience in me that I don't want to wait from week to week. And as such, I think it impresses me more than the others because when you marathon a show, it's very easy to kind of like tune out the storylines that you don't care about and tune into the ones that you do. And anything I marathon always gets ranked higher for me. So it is sort of in an honorary mention category of its own. If I had to rank it with the rest of them, it would be ranked higher than Batwoman and tied or below Superman and Lois. But that might be marathon goggles kind of clouding my judgment and my love of the two sisters. So that is my ranking. Opportunities for improvement. Superman and Lois. Very little opportunity for improvement. Excellent show overall. I will say, this is just a minor request. I would love for Lois to have a friend who's not Lana or a coworker. I know I ask for a lot, but that's just my minor little, I want her to have a friend that's not Lana or a coworker. Opportunities for improvement with Batwoman. Let new Batwoman shine. Let Ryan shine without bringing in Kate Kane. I can see the writing on the wall from the preview next week. They are going to try to do some sort of dual gray area Batwoman thing with this new Kate Kane. I don't want it. I didn't ask for it. Ruby Rose left. She was great. Let it be. We love our new Batwoman. We didn't ask for another one, or I didn't ask for another one. For Supergirl, opportunity for improvement. Fix your romance issues, please. And if you need some suggestions, I have free consulting hours Thursday evenings where I can explain to you the Lena and Kara gospel. And for Flash, how they can improve it is Caitlin can leave the show so I have no reason to watch anymore, and then I will shut up. They can buy my silence by getting rid of the last reason that I am watching. I rest my case. I set down my gavel. I open the floor.
Let's start with you mentioned fixing Supergirl, like their relationship issues, right? But
yeah.
How many episodes do they have left now? Like a handful?
Yeah, maybe so just a couple.
I can't imagine them focusing the rest of the season riding off into the sunset saying, hey, what relationship are we going to fix? Particularly what romantic relationship are we going to either fix or going to bring in at the last moment? That's one of the strangest things about Supergirl for me right now is this is their final season. And so it's like, what is their end game? What point are they trying to get to? And I have no idea what it's supposed to be. I don't know when the final credits for Supergirl rolls for their last episode, I have absolutely no idea what I should be looking for or what I should be rooting for to see right before that happens. In most shows that I watch, you can tell, you know what you want, you know what you need to see before the show leaves. Supergirl, I have no idea, none. And so that's why it's sort of tough, and I just don't know. So I guess if I was going to say fix something in Supergirl, start right now. Tell me right now what I should be looking for in terms of when this show routes off into the sunset, because I don't know what it's supposed to be.
I think that's a fair question. I will say I think I know how it will end, what stance they will take, but it's just not one that I think is fully fleshed out. So as you know, with Superman, Supergirl, etc., any Kryptonian coming in, pretty critical to their story here on Earth is caring for humanity, taking care of humanity. And they will have save the world situations, but they also have usually a set of humans that they deeply care about, and that represents their care for humanity. For Superman, that's Lois and, you know, his kids and his family and so on. For Supergirl, because they failed so hard on the writing, all she has is her sister, who she deeply loves and cares about. Now, that's not nothing. That's a huge thing. That is huge. But where that leaves us stranded is she's had that all along. She did not have an estranged human sister that she had to grow to love. She did not have an evil human sister that she had to redeem. She did not have a dying human sister that she's been trying to save this whole time, or a weak baby human sister that she's trying to. None of that. There was no progression there. It's wonderful that they've been great loving sisters this whole time, but that is not a storyline. So I am left seeing Kara try to become attached to humanity and a savior to humanity, and her sister can remain the most important person in her life, but that cannot represent her growing attachment to humanity. Likely a romance, or if we want to get a little more far-fetched, you know, an attachment to a child or something like that. Maybe a very deep friendship. Something to that effect has to represent her growing love for humanity. And I do kind of want it to be a romance. I don't need them to take too much time on it being a romance. I think they've dedicated more than enough time to failed romances on this show. But insofar as, you know, Superman got to have this future and family and so on, I would like for Kara to have that as well in some form. And romance is just kind of my default desired storyline because I like that kind of thing. But I'm open to something else. I'm not open to her sister representing that, only because that's not a progression. It's not to knock the sister relationship. Love the sister relationship.
Well, let me say two things that might make you sick, or I don't know. So talking about Kara's relationship, right? What if, like, at the end of the season, we get like a visit, I don't know, from someone from like the 31st century, and says, "Hey, Kara, there are enough heroes on this earth. They can take the fight. Why don't you come and be a symbol in the 31st century and reunite with you know who?"
No, strongly disagree.
I'm not
0 out
saying
of
that's
10.
going.
No
I'm not
stars.
saying that's going to happen, but I would not put that past them. Somehow, I see. I've had this theory where somehow at the end of the season, because here's the deal, right? Supergirl has the show. Everyone on the show is a hero, right?
Mhm.
I mean, you've got two Martians, you've got Dreamer, you've got Brainiac 5, and spoiler alert, you're about to have the new Guardian, right?
Mhm.
So it's like, well, what makes Supergirl special out of all that other than just being a Kryptonian, right? And so I could see them saying, especially since she was away in the Phantom Zone and the world didn't fall apart, right?
Mhm.
So they might say, well, maybe your journey is like in a different time and place. So that's one thing. Here's something else that might make you a little ill. I can't recite it verbatim, but I thought I read or saw or heard that somehow the final episodes of Supergirl will somehow cross over with the Flash in some respect or form. And I'm just wondering, does that say, hey, this could be interesting, or good God, no, I don't want to see it?
I don't mind if it crosses over the Flash. I think Supergirl and the Flash very much they aim for similar tones, even if they don't always land at similar tones. That doesn't bother me as long as there's, you know, kind of meaning or it moves the story forward. And I don't think you're wrong, by the way, about Monel possibly coming back. I don't want that, and that doesn't tie her to humanity because technically he's an alien as well. So again, that's denying her a connection that other supers would have had. I do want to jump in the chat because there's some comments related to what you're saying. Stormy says, given how Supergirl makes crappy romantic decisions, she agrees that she thinks Mon-El might come back, but if they kill Alex, she is going to fight someone. Agreed. And she says a negative Supergirl is the queer baiting in the writing. They know they're doing it, yet they act like they don't. Strongly agree. The Supercorp fans are kind of what they have left. But they built that. They kind of built this on, some pretty homophobic stances. And I don't think they can rectify that house at this time. Kate, I want to bring you in to mention a positive that you've mentioned here in the chat because you had a couple pieces of news. So I'm going to put you up here and I'm going to put myself as floating in the back again. Can you talk to us about what's going on with our past Arrow showrunner, Miss Beth Schwartz?
Yeah, so I forgot a couple of things for the news. So sadly, the Zoe Extraordinaries playlist is going to be canceled unless somebody picks it back up. But as of right now, it's canceled. But Beth Schwartz, who was the showrunner for the last 2 or 3 seasons of Arrow, has now put out a show called Sweet Tooth on Netflix. I actually saw this a couple months ago. It looks interesting. It kind of follows a kid. Something about him being like half deer. I don't know. It looks very sci-fi, but it also looks very much like wholesome. Like it's supposed to be kind of following his kind of like coming of age story, I guess. I don't know. But it looks good. And I liked what she did with the show. I thought she kind of brought something new and revamped 7 and 8 in a great way. So I am willing to give it a chance because I thought she was great.
I think that sounds really cool. I liked what she did with the show as well. I like that she was with Arrow all along, so I can give her credit for all of their good decisions and give her no responsibility for any of their bad decisions. I think that's how that works.
Okay.
Well, Kate, while you're here, I did have something on the agenda for you at this point. I really held myself back from going too all in on my lowest strength show, The Flash, just because they did just have a, kind of sad episode this week with Cisco leaving, and they gave us some really cute moments, and I loved the little poker face thing that they had at the end of the episode with him and Barry and Joe and Caitlin. That was super, super cute. They can count that as their show ending, but you somehow broke free, as mentioned earlier in the chat, of the Arrowverse curse, as it were, and you are now owning the part of the agenda that we're going to call Commercial Break with Kate, where you pitch me and Carey what we should be watching instead of the shows that we're complaining about. So take it away.
I mean, it's not that hard of a pitch because I know you both are probably going to already watch it. Loki. So it came out this morning. I've already seen it. There isn't a whole lot of big plot points because it was very much trying to get you introduced into kind of all the new characters and the authority, the TVA, as what it's called, of who he's going to be running around with, and making sure everybody understands which version of Loki we're talking about. But I will say thematically of like the things we're going to be exploring is already very clear. So it actually is kind of funny. I think that the release order was supposed to be Falcon and Winter Soldier, then WandaVision, then Loki.
Okay.
Because WandaVision and Loki were so similar in the ideas that they're kind of going through with trauma and kind of confronting that they never started out wanting to be villains, but they chose the wrong path. Then they got worse, and now he's having to confront, okay, do I want to be a villain? Why do I do these bad things? Why do I hurt people? And it's definitely very clearly going to be an exploration of, is he a villain? Is he an anti-hero? Is he a hero? And him having to choose, and him kind of going through this kind of like personal journey, while we also discover who the real big bad is coming forward. And I'm sure you both saw somewhere at some point the really, really heavy comic book theories during WandaVision about Mephisto being behind it all. I never really went into that when I was talking theories because I just didn't think it was going to happen within the scope of WandaVision, but I fully understand where people were talking about it coming up in the next few phases of Marvel. And from the get-go, they're showing us visual cues and a heavier level to that than even WandaVision did. And I mean, there's this cute little kind of infomercial in part of it to explain to Loki what's going on, involving this animated clock. It's kind of adorable in a weird, sad way, but it mentions things like the Nexus, madness, multiverse war, and all of those things were hints that you occasionally would get when we were watching WandaVision. So it's very clear to me that that's definitely what we're going to start exploring in this show, and what's probably going to be a big focus in Doctor Strange 2, especially since it's called Multiverse of Madness. I know I'm really pulling things out of my hat here. Then I also really thought it was interesting because both with WandaVision and now with Loki, there's this interesting meld of technology and science and magic that hasn't really always been the main focus in the Marvel Universe. I mean, you had technology like Iron Man and the Super Soldier Serum and stuff like that, and you had little hints of magic every once in a while. Some characters had magic, but it wasn't quite as big of a focus. It is now, because there was this, in WandaVision, there was this argument of, is it technology, is it magic? And we were even talking about how the magic that was there was very technology equivalent. And that's kind of the same now. It's this whole discussion about why he can't use his magic in this like scientific time bubble, basically, where they are currently. It's really interesting, and I wonder how that's also going to play in to the multiverse thought theory, because in sci-fi and fantasy, which is kind of what this is, it both kind of plays into technology and magic when you talk about like multiverses, because there's a theoretical science behind that, but also you're kind of stretching it and you're making it magical and mystical, and you're kind of going through that, which is really fun and interesting. And to be honest, I think it's far more interesting than anything Marvel's done previously, at least within the scope of the action. And it does, because all the characters involved are so morally complex, offer such a great deal of potential with the character development as well.
Well, I'm sold. I will definitely be watching the Loki show. Carey, will you be watching it as well?
I certainly will. I'm pretty sure I'll be watching it during my lunch break tomorrow.
Yeah.
I did have a question though, and I think you might have answered a little bit, because this is the Loki they pulled from 2012, I guess, at the end of the first Avengers. So, is there a definitive like time and place that they are in this new series, or is it sort of nebulous?
In a way, it's nebulous, because most of, like 90% of the episode takes place in the headquarters of the Time Variant Authority, which is this like basically time unaffected location. However, it's very much like Loki emotionally, and for like the actual part of the story is very much from 2012, and it actually starts like it has clips from the first Avengers movie to kind of really solidify, okay, this is where he is, but then it's interspersed with the cuts from Endgame, where they are trying to get the Tesseract and it fails. So it is very much like, in that way, it is all the way back from 2012, but it's also kind of nebulous. It's a weird way to explain the time.
Stormy in the chat says, just saw Barry breakdancing in the Flash suit on Twitter. Is secondhand embarrassment possible for a fictional character? Secondhand embarrassment is possible for a fictional character. However, this is not necessarily saying anything, but that was one of my favorite scenes from last week's episode, or last night's episode. That's not saying much, though. There was some bad scenes that really weren't giving it much competition. But with that, I will transition us to close out the State of the DC Union with our 2 minute each piece of where do we go from here. And actually, I'll bequeath my 2 minutes away. I've said enough. I'll give you both 3 minutes to talk about where do we go from here with DC CW. Carey, would you like to go first? I know I just gestured to Kate, but it's because I don't understand how mirrors work.
I'll go first. And this sort of goes to something you had mentioned earlier about sort of the age dynamic on these shows. And it sort of ties into like the Marvel Universe to a great degree when you get to Endgame, which was the culmination of so much, right? Mm-hmm. And then the question is like, well, what do we do after that happens? And we've seen with Marvel that there's been an adjustment that had to be made. The same with the CWDC universe and the fact that they had their crisis, which was essentially their Endgame. And then the question becomes, well, what do we do now? And so when you look at the shows that they have remaining, and you look at the age dynamic that they have, because you have people who started out watching Arrow, and that was on for 7, 8 seasons, whatever the case may be. So you've had people who age with those characters and that sort of thing. And I don't want to say that they've aged out, but it's sort of like an entire generation has come and gone, right? Mm-hmm. So how do you sort of revamp or revitalize the what they're doing? And that's when you bring in newer shows with younger casts and that sort of thing. You can still have the connections, as small as they might be, to what came before. But I think the only way that you can go forward and try to build on what the Arrowverse had done up to this point is to take what they did, do really good shows, and engage younger people, because they're going to be the ones that are going to ultimately carry it on. Obviously, we can continue to watch and pick up things that we like, but I mean, though, that's your target audience, and we're talking about the CW, right? So it skews young. So I think that's something that I think these shows are going to lean in on, particularly when you're getting rid of Black Lightning, which had an older cast. Obviously, Supergirl is leaving, and my guess, question mark, Flash may have another season or so. Legends is sort of the same way, but it's the shows that are finding ways to obviously have new characters, have new dynamics in terms of age and that sort of thing, is probably what's going to carry this universe forward. But there are going to be some missteps, obviously, but it's sort of like at the end of an era, it's like, well, yeah, we've got some things we've got to do now. And I have some faith and some confidence. I guess we'll see.
Yeah, for me, like I said, I'm really only watching Superman and Lois. If they continue to kind of do what they're doing and explore and kind of not pulling their punches on like exploring what they already have, but not rushing through things and making it all about the flash, like all about the pizzazz of what they've got. I think they have potential to keep going for quite a while, especially with, there's the clear generational like handoff that they've kind of written into that show. So there's definitely potential for it to last a long time. We'll just see if they can actually pull it off. And then with the rest of the shows, yeah, that's currently on. I don't see how many of them will last much longer, which definitely offers up more spaces for them to start new ones. But hopefully they'll kind of learn from previous mistakes and maybe kind of start adopting the Superman and Lois style and not be how the new generation of the Arrowverse is stylized.
I would really like them to adopt what you're saying, the kind of multi-generational Superman and Lois style, where we're not just bringing in kids in the last season, but they are there all along. I think that has a lot of potential, and it has a lot of potential to turn this from kind of just like guilty pleasure young adult type of show to being more of a full spectrum, whether you are ancient like me, or like actually a teenager the age of those watching, or a parent of a like you can actually watch it and not feel like you're watching something with the Riverdale effect. I say this as somebody who actively watches Riverdale, but my standards are on the floor. So with that said, normally this is the part of the show where we'd get into what else we watched this week, but I think we're going to have to let that remain a mystery. Do we watch anything other than DCCW? We will have to bring you back on to find out if that is the case. I suspect, based on the Wonder Woman shirt and the awareness of Marvel, that you do. But if anybody watching would like to find you, chat with you about anything, where can you be found, Mr. Carey Johnson?
I can be found on Facebook, Carey Johnson 919. Twitter is the same handle. And if you think you want to watch and come enjoy the fun of Legends, you can join our group. It's on Facebook, /groups/Tomorrow's Legends. So there you go.
Absolutely. And I have Carey's social listed in the description below as well. So thank you, Carey, for joining us. I will say, I feel in this space that's frequently quite negative, you injected a lot of positivity about the state of the DC CW franchise and a lot of hope for how this can go moving forward. So I feel prepared going into kind of finale season, which is what I'll refer to as like the last 3 or 4 episodes for each of these shows. And we would love to have you come back on at some point, maybe talk about all of the finales with us, maybe talk about what we're going to be watching over the summer, other than The Bachelorette. We're all obviously watching The Bachelorette over the summer, but other than that.
Anytime.
With that, I will here, Kate, I'm going to put you in the background and I'm going to take this off. There we go. With that, I will bid it's so cute. I will bid you guys, there it is. I will bid you guys farewell. I will see you same time, same